I'd like to propose a toast. A few men will pick your glasses up, please. Let me borrow yours a minute here. Hold it up. To our wives and our sweethearts, may the two never meet. Now, I appreciate that very gracious introduction. It reminds me of when Bob Taylor was running for the office of the governor of Tennessee many years ago. And one fellow that campaigned very vigorously for him was a farmer friend, a mountaineer, lived way out in the woods. Well, it so happened Mr. Taylor won the election to the office of governor, and he thought it only proper that he invite his farmer friend to the governor's banquet or ball. We call it supper here. So he did. So this farmer had his wife to wash, starch, and iron his overalls. He put them things on and hightailed it up there. Well, they gave him a very prominent seat next to he and his wife, the governor did. Well, among other things on the menu, they had hot candied sweet potatoes in the hold. And I can't think of anything much hotter than that. Well, after they had the invocation, this farmer just reached down and picked up his fork and cut off a big piece of that sweet potato and threw it in his mouth. Well, I mean, it just literally set him on fire. Well, he just spit it out in his hand and put it back down in the plate. The governor's wife was looking over at him kind of big-eyed, you know. He looked at her and said, "Madam, some fools would have swallowed that." So don't swallow everything you hear about me, good or bad. Now, one thing that you'll notice that makes me quite a distinguished fellow are my ears. Now, I was 3 months old before they knew whether I was going to fly or walk. We lived way out in the country, and when my mother called me, she said when I come down the road running that I look like a car coming down the road with both doors open. But if you think they're big now, you ought to have seen them before they froze now the rim broke off. They was real big then. I was standing down in the hotel lobby a few days ago waiting on a friend of mine, and while I was standing down there in the course of about 10 minutes, 6 people hung their coats on my ears. I'd like to tell you about the last time my mother rode a train. I was about that long, about as long as my foot was. We had been somewhere, I don't know, but anyway, it was about a 2-hour trip. When we were on our way back, there was a fellow sitting across from my mother. Well, all the way back, this guy just kept looking at me, you know, just gazing at me. Well, it upset my mother a little bit, and as we got toward the end of the trip, she said, "Fella, I want to ask you a question." "All right," he said, "go ahead. What is it?" She said, "You've been staring, just gazing at my baby this whole trip. Is something wrong with him?" He said, "Well, madam, since you've asked me, I'll just tell you. I know that is the ugliest young'un that I've ever seen in all my life." Well, that just tore my mama all to pieces. She went to hooting, the hollering, the squalling, the carrying on, and of course it attracted the attention of the conductor. He came by and said, "What's the problem, lady?" "Well, what? Never mind. But I've never been so low-rated, humiliated, and disgraced, and if I ever get off this train, brother, I'll never get on her again." He said, "Now, lady, I don't know what happened, but I just know it couldn't be that bad. Why don't you sit down here and tell me about it? We can work it out." "No, I've never been so humiliated and low-rated in all my life. If I ever get off this train, brother, I'll never get on again." "Now, lady, listen," he said. "I've been a conductor on this train for 31 years. And I ain't come across anything yet that I couldn't work out. I just know I couldn't. Now, you sit down here and tell me." No, it was the same story. He said, "Listen, lady, why don't we do this? Maybe this will help. Why don't you come on down to the diner with me and let me get us a cup of coffee, and let's sit down and work this thing out. I know we can work it out." No, it was the same old story, you know. Finally, in one last desperate effort, he said, "Lady, please, won't you come on down to the diner? Let me get us a cup of coffee, and let's sit down and work this thing out. And while we're down there, I'll see if I can't find a banana for your monkey." To give you some idea of how ugly I was at my birth, when I come into the world, we lived 3.5 miles down a dirt road from the paved road. Some know that. Well, when I came into the world, my daddy came in, took one look at me, turned, walked out, and started walking that 3.5 miles down that dirt road toward the highway. When he got over there, he waited for the next Greyhound bus that come by, flagged that thing down, got on it, rode into town, got off at the bus station, started walking across the mountain over there where they'd started the zoo, and he stayed over there for 2 days throwing rocks at the stork. They almost lost me when I was a young'un, but they didn't take me far enough into the woods. Now, I want to tell you a little about my education. Now, I started my education in a 2-room school. They started with the 1st grade and put just as many young'uns as they could get in there, all the 1st, all the 2nd, all the 3rd, all the 4th, and all the 5th, if they could get them in there. Didn't matter. They just filled it up. Well, they got thinking that was terrible for us, you know. That is just bad. So they closed the school down and began hauling us all off on buses and built more schools and divided us up, you know, said it wasn't good for us to mix and mingle the way we was doing. Well, nowadays they've changed that thing, and they say that's the way to learn. So, see, I ain't dumb as folks think I am, really. I learned a lot in that schoolhouse. But anyway, they've changed. But I do remember one distinctive advantage that I had over all the other boys in the 1st grade. I had a driver's license. I was the only one in the 3rd grade that could vote. And I stayed in the 3rd grade so long they promoted me from the 3rd to the 4th. Had a little promotion day and made a special little gown just for me in a special promotion day. My mother made it. I remember it had 684 on it. I'd always wanted a shirt with 688 on it, but never did get it. But anyway, she made me this special gown with 684 on it, and I never will forget that morning that I was going to be promoted from the 3rd to the 4th. I got up. I was so excited, I could hardly shave without cutting myself. Well, of all things, I went on there. I went on to high school, and you never have heard about my football career now, though, in my sport. I was a great sportsman. And nobody's ever made a write-up on me, though, about my football position. I played tailback. Every time I jumped up, the coach said, "Get your tail back on that thing." Now, I went on over to Hard College. That was before it was sand-prized. And I didn't graduate cum laude or semi-cum laude. I graduated oh lordy. I stayed over there so long folks would pass me on the campus and won't know what I taught. I said longevity and just kept on going. But of all things, I am now married to a school teacher. Of all things. I went with a couple of other school teachers before I married June, but I dropped them. One didn't have any class, and the other didn't have any principal. But one of these girlfriends of mine, I mean, she was a lovely little thing. She had the beautifulest black hair I have ever seen. I mean, it was lovely, jet black, beautiful. Too bad it was all under arms. Now, I am the middle child of 9 young'uns. The middle child of 9 young'uns. And it cost $45. 5 times 9 is 45. $45 is all it costs to bring all of us into the world. $5 a trip, so all old Dr. Charles come out there to the house. And all of us come into the world for $45. Now, I'm a depression boy. Some of you remember that. I had a patch on the seat of my pants as big as Hoover's hat. And, well, one of my sisters was so poor, the dogs buried that young'un in the front yard 3 times. They thought she was a bone. Me and my brother dug her up, or of course she would have died. She was so thin and so poor, she could drink tomato juice and she looked like a thermometer. If she hadn't had an Adam's apple, she wouldn't have had any figure at all. She could turn sideways and stick her tongue out and she looked like a zipper. I remember one time my mama made her a beautiful striped dress out of some of that fine Jim Dandy yarn, you know. Worked all day sewing and making that striped dress for her. Well, that young was so thin, when she got through making that dress, it didn't have but 1 stripe on it. And friend, that's really thin. She went to the doctor one time to get a physical examination. The doctor examined her. She jumped up and said, "Well, how do I stand, doctor?" He said, "The Lord only knows. It's a miracle to me." But she's doing better now. She's on a diet of bananas and coconuts. She hadn't gained a lot of weight. Boy, you ought to see her climbing trees. But my mother thought that this sister, just older than me, was an angel that had fallen from heaven. Too bad she fell on her face. That wasn't much, was it? Now listen, you know nowadays everybody's interested in moving out in the country. Well, when I come up, everybody wanted to come to the city. They really did. Everybody wanted to move into town. You know, nowadays they wanting to get out. When I come up, we didn't have no 8 rooms and 2 baths. We had 2 rooms and 1 bath. Well, nowadays everybody's wanting to get out, you know, out in the country. Well, this young couple wanted to get them a place out in the country, and they heard about a farmer that had one for sale. So one Sunday evening, they got in the car and drove off out that way to eyeball it. They got out there and looked the thing over, and they liked it very well, and on the way back, they were talking about it. She said, "Steve?" And he said, "Yeah." She said, "You know, I liked that house pretty good, didn't you?" And he said, "Yeah, I did." She said, "But there was something that I don't believe I noticed that was in that house." "And what was that?" She said, "I didn't notice a bathroom commode. Did you?" "Well," he said, "to come to think about it, I don't believe it did." Well, she said, "Well, listen, you know, we're city folks. There just ain't no way we can live without an indoor bath. Now, we just got to have that." Said, "I like the house and would like to have it, but if it doesn't have a bath in it, we just can't." He said, "Well, we ain't got time to go back out there and look at it. Why don't you write him and ask him about it?" Well, she was a city girl, kind of shy and modest and timid, you know, and she didn't want to spell out the word bathroom commode. So in the letter when she wrote to ask him about it, she just put down the letters BC. She said, "Dear sir, while we were out there, we enjoyed seeing the house a lot, and we'd like to have the house, but I don't think we noticed a BC while we were there. Could you tell us if there is a BC? Because, you know, we're here in the city, we're just used to a BC, and there's just not hardly any way we can get along without a BC." Well, that old boy got that letter, and he read that thing, and he couldn't figure out for ham and eggs what she was talking about. The BC. "Come over here, Marthy," he said to his little woman, and she come over there and said, "Reckon what in the world he's talking about? BC. BC. She said, "The Lord only knows, John, I don't." Well, that old boy had sat and read that thing. He read it, and he reread it till it was just slick with use. He'd wore it out folding it and unfolding it, you know. For 3 weeks, all day, he'd just sit and look at that thing, you know. The BC, the BC. Finally, one day, after about 3 weeks, he was sitting there, and one day he said, "I got it, Marthy, I got it. Come here quick, come here." She come running over. He said, "There ain't but one thing she could have meant by this BC here." "And what is that?" she said. He said, "She's got to mean Baptist Church." So he wrote her a letter and told her about it, and this is what he wrote. He said, "Dear Madam, I'm terribly sorry that it's took me so long to answer your letter, but I take pleasure in informing you that the BC is located about 9 miles from the house and is capable of seating 1,250 people. Now, this makes it very unhandy indeed if you've been in the habit of going regular. It could become a painful trip because of the distance. It'll sure be different from town where all the BCs are Johnny on the spot. And I'm not sure that a body could hold out to make the trip even once a day on these rough roads. However, it'll no doubt interest you to know that a great number of people, on the other hand, just take their dinner and make a day of it. While a whole lot of others just barely get there in time, but are usually in too big a hurry to stay for dinner. Especially if the house is crowded, which it usually is in the morning hours. It seems that a lot of folks around us just don't believe in letting a building like this go to waste. The last time that me and my little woman got to go was about 4 years ago. But after we got there, we had to stand up all the time. Now, it causes us a great deal of pain not to be able to go more often. It's through no lack of desire, however, but the older we get, it seems to take a lot more effort, especially in cold weather. I certainly think that a body ought to do more than warm a seat once in a while. But when you get as old as we are, the longer you sit on them wooden seats, the harder they get. And after about an hour, you just can't hardly get up. Maybe when spring comes, we can get some relief. If you think you could meet us there one Sunday, let us know, and we'll try to get there early and spread out a little holes you'll see. I hope that I can see you there soon, as I certainly would like to see more of both of you. Sincerely, your future landlord. Well, so much for the country store there. All right, now, after I got out of school, I went in the service. I served a hitch in the Navy and a hitch in the Army. I was a glutton for punishment. Well, I remember we were at sea, and we were carrying a bunch of troops across. A big troop ship. We had, I don't know, several thousand troops on that thing, sailors and soldiers. You know, well, we got in a storm. And we all got sick, just about all of us. You know, well, the rail was just covered. I mean, this lined rail, there wasn't a place for anybody else feeding the fish. And I was hanging over there, too, you know. Well, I'd always been carrying on a bunch of old junk, you know. The officer of the deck came walking by, and he looked over and said, "Well, Massey, you got kind of a weak stomach, haven't you?" I said, "No, sir, I'm throwing it as far as anybody else is." About that time, the captain came by and looked over at me and said, "Heave up the anchor, Massey." I'd already thrown up everything from my tongue to my pyloric valve then. Well, after I got over in Europe, you know, they got a lot of tunnels over there in Europe that the trains go through on the railroad, you know. Well, I decided that I wanted to take leave for about 30 or 40 days, and I was going to ride the train and tour Europe. Well, I took leave, and I was on this train, and next to me there was a 2-star general. He was on leave, too. I don't know why he had taken the train, unless just to get away from everybody, you know, but we didn't have too much to say to each other. He had 2 stars, and I had 2 stripes. Well, really, I had 3, 2 on my arm, 1 down my back. But he didn't have too much to say. We were just riding along. But across in front of the general sat a grandmother. Next to her was one of the prettiest little blondes you've ever seen. In front of me. Well, we was riding along there. Nobody been talking too much. And we went through one of these long, dark tunnels. It's pitch black dark in there. Well, when we went smoking through that thing, it was deathly silent and cold black dark. And nobody said a word, but you could hear a slap. Man, I mean, it rung and you could feel it. Nobody said a word. In a minute, we broke out in the daylight on the other side, you know, and everybody just kind of looking at one another. That grandma said to herself, she said, "That young soldier over there tried to kiss my granddaughter, and she slapped him." The granddaughter said to herself, "That general tried to kiss my grandma while we was in that tunnel, and she slapped him." The general thought to himself, this soldier sitting next to me tried to kiss that girl while we was in that tunnel. She slapped at him, missed him, and hit me. But I was about to choke to death to keep from laughing. I said, "I never had so much fun in my life." I kissed the back of my hand and slapped the daylights out of a general. Well, as you can see from this, I finally got court-martialed. We were having a command inspection, and we were standing there at present guns. They made us say arms then, but they can't make me now. It's a gun. Don't let nobody kid you. We were standing there at present arms, holding that thing. Next to me was a sergeant. Well, the colonel moved down the line just as he come to the sergeant. Just as he started to grab that sergeant's rifle, you know, that sergeant hit him. I mean, he hit him. Knocked him just as flat as a flitter. Well, I piled on, and I was just beating the daylights out of that general, you know. Well, they court-martialed, they court-martialed both of us. They had us up in the court, and of course they wanted an explanation. They said to the sergeant, "Why did you slug the colonel?" The sergeant said, "Well, Your Honor, it was like this." He said, "I have a very bad sore toe." And unknown to the colonel, as he came moving down the line, he stepped on my sore toe. And my natural reflexes, before I could control them, was to hit him. And so I hit him. Well, they came on to me and said, "What about you, soldier?" I said, "Your Honor, all I know is that when I saw the sergeant hit the colonel, I thought the war was over." Of course, it was just starting for me. old boy got awful. He's a country boy, and he got a terrible pain in his back and in his chest. So he decided he better go to the doctor, so he got on his overalls and he took off to walking. He got down to this little town to see the town doctor, and the doctor sat him down and said, open your mouth. That's the first thing to do, and then they go to asking you questions. He said, said, mister, I see one. He'd never been a doctor before, and he's scared anyhow. He said, I see one thing's wrong with you right off. Said, you ain't got no slobber. Well, that scared that guy half to death. He didn't know what he's talking. Now, if he had said slobber, he'd have known, see. But anyhow, he didn't notice the old boy was kind of turning white around the gills, He said, let me have a listen to you, and he pulled his overhaul bib back and stuck that little stethoscope in there and thumped on him like he's a watermelon, and said, and on top of that, my friend, you got a tarpy liver, whatever that is. He said, if you ain't careful, that thing's liable to collapse any minute. When he said that, the old boy just rolled his eyes and went out like a light. No, he said, it ain't that bad. Wait a minute. He grabbed the bottle of smelling salts and went to wade them under his nose. Said, look, you're going to make it. You'll be all right. And he reached back and got a big old bottle of pills. He said, now look here. Listen just a minute. Now, you're going to be all right. Said, I want you to go home and get complete bed rest, and I want you to take these pills. It's some of them pills that says, take one pill 3 times a day. Now, how can you do that? The only way I know you can do it is tie a string on it. But anyhow, he told him to take one of them pills 3 times a day. By the way, I went to the doctor the other day, and on the way to the drugstore, I finally deciphered that prescription. You know what it said? It said, I got my $15. He's all yours now. I thought I had a rare disease till I saw the druggist reach back and got me a handful of pills out of a 10-gallon jug. Well, anyway, this old boy grabbed them pills, and he hightailed it home. He walks fast. He couldn't have been too bad off. But anyhow, he just crawled in the bed, overhauled shoes and all. There he lay looking and seething, just white as death, scared. His wife come in. She'd been hoeing out in the garden or something. She come in, sat down on the edge of the bed and said, well, John, what's the matter? Don't touch me. Don't touch me. Well, what's the matter with you? What did he say? Well, he said the first thing he said is, I ain't got no salvation. And on top of that, there's a torpedo in my liver, and that thing's liable to go off just any minute. This old boy went to the doctor, and he had a terrible pain in his chest. The doctor said, now, I want you to cough a little for me. He said, no, sir, it'll kill me. He said, come on now, cough. He patted him on the back. He wouldn't do it. He said, I said cough. And he wouldn't do it. And he patted him a little harder, No, sir, he wouldn't. He said, I said cough. And he just wadded his fist up. He hit him between the shoulders like a broken back. Said, I said cough. And the guy said, oh. He said, now, just how long have you had that cough? This old boy went to the doctor. It's kind of a young fellow. The doctor examined him real good. He said, now, fellow, I want to tell you something. Said, this may sound unusual to you and may sound impossible, but he said, it's the truth. He said, if you don't get your mind off the girls, you're going to lose your hearing completely. The old boy said, lose my hearing? The doctor said, what did you say? This old boy went to the doctor, and his hand was in terrible shape. The doctor said, let me see that hand. He looked at that a little closer. He looked at that thing. He said, wait just a minute. He run back and back, looked through his medical books, and he come back and looked. Let me see that again. He looked at it and said, have you ever had that before? He said, yes, sir. He said, you got it again. Now, my doctor, every time I go, he makes me stand in front of this big glass window, big, long plate glass window. When I stick my tongue out, he don't like the guy across the street. This fella had a terrible accident. A terrible an automobile accident, and he lost sight of this eye, and his doctor told him, said, now look, friend, I hate to tell you, not only are you going to lose sight in that eye, but you're going to also have to have your eye removed from its socket. We're going to have to put you in an artificial eye. Well, that just tore him up something terrible. He said, now look, don't get upset. Said, well, I can fix you up. Said, well, we can make artificial eye nowadays out of the world's best plastics. Nobody hardly knows. Said, go here and let me show you something. He went over and grabbed this little case and flipped it up, and there's a big old eyeball gandering at him. This is made out of the world's best plastics, he said. He said, and I can make it just like your other eye unless somebody looks mighty close. They're not going to know the deal. How much is it? He said, well, that was $300. Whoo, man, said that's all. Ain't you got something cheaper than that? Well, yeah, I have. Matter of fact, said, look here. He reached over and grabbed another little case, flipped that thing up, and there's another eyeball gandering at it. He said, now, the only difference in this and the other one is that was plastic and this was made out of wood. But it's lightweight, durable, quality, and I can fix this thing up. Nobody can hardly tell the difference between this and your real eye. How much is it? Well, he said, I can let you have this wooden knife for $75. Well, he said, finances forcing me to take the wooden knife. So, they set the date that he had come to the hospital and be fitted for this wooden knife. So he went in, and they fixed him up. Well, he stood before the mirror, and he looked at that thing. It looked pretty good, you know. But he was so self-conscious about that wood eye, he just couldn't stand the thoughts of somebody mentioning it. So he just withdrew from everybody. For a whole year, he sat at home. He wouldn't go anywhere. But it got to getting on his nerves, and he just walking the floor, rubbing his hands. He just couldn't stand it. He couldn't say. He said, "This is getting on my nerves. I've got to do something. I've got to mingle with folks. I've got to get out of here." So being a good Baptist, he decided he'd go to a dance. He knew that the lights would be kind of low down there anyway, so that Saturday he got out his suit and ironed it and put that thing on. He hightailed it down there. He got down there to that little dance hall, and he just slipped in, you know, and sat down over on the side by the door in the chair. And oh, it was good just to be among folks again. He felt so better just being there, just sitting there. He's just watching. Time flew by. First thing he knew, an hour and a half was gone. He'd just been sitting there enjoying the scenery, just being among folks. Well, he got to noticing that all the time he was sitting there, that way across the floor over there on the other side was a nice-looking blonde. At least she is nice-looking, the best he could tell one eye. And she had been sitting there for an hour and a half also. He got carrying on a little dialogue with himself. Said, you know, she hadn't danced a lick either. He said, I might just go over there and ask her to dance. Said, after all, she might have a handicap like I've got. And she's got one. I'll just not mention her handicap. Maybe she won't mention mine if she knows it. And he said, no, I better not do that. She might notice this wood, and if she said anything about this wood, I'd kill me. Well, he said, I'm going anyhow. He got up and started moseying off over that way, and he got pretty close. He noticed he had never seen her before, didn't know her, but he did notice that she had a little handicap in that she was hare-lipped. Well, he said to himself, what the foot? I got this artificial eye, this wood eye. She's hare-lipped. I'll just not mention her handicap. Maybe she won't mention mine. So he walked up to her and said, pardon me, madam, would you care to dance? Of course, she had been sitting there for an hour and a half. She jumped about 3 feet in the air, hit the floor, and said, would I? Would I? He looked at her and said, hare-lip, hare-lip.